I just look back. I think it's been a lot of trial and error, which I think life can be. I think it's been a lot of luck in some instances and timing. And then I do believe in angels. And I don't know that angels are like we perceive them with wings, but I do think people that maybe cross over are allowed to intervene every now and again. And I think there are hundreds of thousands of angels on earth, through my lifetime, from both sides, from the divine and also from the earth. These angels have carried me through. And a big reason why I'm sitting here is because of that.
Welcome to the Know Your Ship podcast, presented by eHub. I'm your host, Frank Dolce. That is such a great introduction to this podcast today. And welcome, Tim Lacomb,
Frankie
the Renaissance man. I'm so excited to talk to you because of all that you just described and all that you just talked about. And my thought about this podcast today is just like the life and times of Tim Lacomb, because I think there's so much wisdom and insight from all of your experience. So I hope you're okay talking about that. And I might poke fun at you a little bit.
Well, I wouldn't expect anything less. One of the first, I didn't know you all that well, and I had to do something. And as always, like even today, you tried to have your receptionist come out and tell me you weren't taking guests.
And she wouldn't.
So
it was such a great setup.
So yes, I get it. The jokes will be there. And I've tried to become a better sport the older I've gotten. I used to take life way too seriously.
I don't know that guy. I don't know the guy that takes life way too seriously. You seem like the guy, you just take it as it comes and you can let things roll off your back and you don't get too caught up in all of the drama and the mess. Is that not what you were previously?
Well, I think that's ideally who I'd love to be. I think I'm evolving toward that. Mm-hmm. But, like we talked about, there's a lot of circumstance in your life that kind of set habits of how you react to things. And, one of the more pivotal things that happened in my young life was from the time I was born to the time I was 12 years old. And I apologize because when I talk about this stuff, I get a teeny bit emotional.
You can get emotional.
But I think that's okay too. But I didn't want to make you uncomfortable, nor the fern.
No, I typically make everybody in this office emotional. I think it's a gift. I don't know if other people think of it that way, but emotional's okay.
Okay, well.
We're all good.
But from the time I was 1 to 12.
Where is this, by the way?
I grew up, actually where I was born is relevant. I was born in Salt Lake City, and I was born at Holy Cross Hospital, which I always really think's cool. I was the only kid that was born at Holy Cross. And it kind of is symbolic of who I am. I'm not a masses guy. I don't just jump in with the masses and accept everything that's thrown at me. Mm-hmm. I am somebody that's always kind of thinking of how this affects everybody. So the fact that I was born in Holy Cross Hospital, I love. I was raised kind of in the Alpine Highland, more Highland area. Mm-hmm. So the funny part is growing up in that area, you were embarrassed to say you were from up there. You went to school in American Forks, so you'd have to bus down from the country, and everybody is a city kid, and they all got to hang in the city, and you'd go back to the what seemed like 100 miles away, but it was only a mile and a half. But as kids, I remember people saying, "Oh, he's a Highland guy, or he can't play in this football game today that we're all going to play in." So it was fun. It was an awesome experience growing up. But from the time I was 1 to 12 in that area, I think the first thing that happened, I was just an infant, and my grandfather owned a bunch of property, and we had chickens. We did chickens and eggs, and so we had a chicken farm down there. And my parents lived on the farm and kind of tended it. I'm an infant. I had an older brother who's 4. I have an older sister who actually just turned 60 this year. So she was probably 10 at the time, 9 or 10. And so I'm just a baby. I'm home with my mother, and obviously I don't remember any of this, but my sister and brother went for a walk out on the property and encountered a pond. And he had a bow and arrow. He was really into Westerns, always had cowboy hats. But he had an arrow and he shot it into the pond and went to get it. And my sister, he disappeared and she couldn't find him. And so she ran back home. And my mom, like that was the first kind of major thing. A few years later, about the time I was 5, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. And so back to we lost my brother. My dad died after a crazy battle. He was 200 pounds, around that when he got the disease. And as a 12-year-old kid, I kind of helped carry him. I did the lion's share of carrying him to the car the last time. He was under 80 pounds. So that was a rough part of growing up. To my mother's point, during that time, her brother was in a plane crash. And both he and his wife passed. And then we lost 3 out of 4 of my grandparents. So in a 10-year span, I pretty much lost every male role model that a kid has. And that's when I talk about angels. Because I had great uncles who helped pick up the pieces. I had neighbors, a guy by the name of Dennis Durfee, who had 8 kids and found room to always have something more for me. Was friends with his kids, and they took me everywhere and did things with me. So anyway, I digress. But those first 10 years, in total, we lost a bunch of really people close to us, and it made life seem kind of topsy-turvy for me. Mm-hmm. Whether it's been conscious or unconscious, from that point on, it's just been a journey to figure out how to deal with all that, and then obviously how to make a life for yourself.
So as you reflect on that, and it clearly it's close and it's right there on the surface, how did that help you evolve? How do you utilize that the way you are today? And from like an outside perspective, you're like super approachable. There's instant camaraderie. I've witnessed it. It's happened with me. It happens when we're walking around the office and you're just meeting people for the first time and you don't know who they are. They might not know who you are. There's an instant connection. Is that a manifestation of this trauma that you experienced growing up? Or do you view that as some other force in your life?
I just said kind of what we went through, but to hold our family together, I had the most remarkable mom who's still with us. And I think it's, I watched her interact, and obviously, like, you get home at night and you're dejected. And I mean, she instantly had to be the breadwinner, and she taught dance, started a dance studio and dance company, and she just got really, really involved in all that. But she was always happy, even through all of it. She was, I didn't see her ever play victim. It was never poor us. And again, it's kind of where I learned this, and where I look back to where this started. But my motto in life is people are the secret sauce. When I was in coaching and I was recruiting, it was vital to make an impact and to make a relationship meaningful, because there are so many people that are fine having inauthentic relationships all over the place just to get what they want. But authenticity to me reigns supreme. And I figure if I show people who I am right from the jump, I'm not a guy that plays any games like, no, they're going to have to earn my trust. And, then I'm not necessarily starting the relationship on the right end either. So I would just say that to your question, I think it was a great example and a ton of love from my mom. And then, the rest of this has been, it's been unique because I've kind of hopped from thing to thing. I was just telling you, I graduated college at 35 or 36, and it opened a door for me to go do something that I'd always wanted to do, but just never could. I had a young family, and it opened the door into coaching. And then I went down this college coaching. I went down this 12-year journey of that at BYU, which was just magical, right? But I've kind of taken life as it comes, just like I take people as they come.
Tell me about this. There's a lot to unpack there, but tell me about this. I graduated from college at 36. What?
See, there's the part, you gotta throw a little shade.
I mean, there's a pretty good gap in what was happening in that period. I mean, you went to high school, finished high school. Did you start college at that point?
No. So I went to high school, finished high school, and I basically spent a year trying to decide what I wanted to do now. And I ultimately made the decision to go on a mission for the church, the Mormon church. And so I was called and went and served in Boston, Massachusetts. And that place opened my eyes. That place changed me a bunch.
In which ways?
Well, I read about history in school, but I was less authentic as a younger guy. I was trying, my objective here is to get a grade. I'm just going to figure out how to get a grade. So when I got out there and got immersed in some of that stuff, like you walk around and, you're standing in the basic area of the Boston Tea Party. You walk through Paul Revere's house and you see, like, those aren't just stories. These people had serious guts, man. And when you get out there and you see this is, it really kind of opened up a love of history and a love of understanding the sacrifices people made for us to be where we are today.
There's nothing like being and experiencing it on site.
No, there's not. The Freedom Trail, I'm sure you've done that and walked through town and
it's unbelievable.
See some of those great, people their graves,
Can you, so right there, I'm sure right by that, one of the graveyards is the site of the Boston Massacre.
Yep, that's right. It's right out in the middle of the street.
Yeah.
There's a star that marks that.
Yeah. And can you imagine being in that situation? You've all of a sudden you're in the middle of standing up for an ideal and you have the greatest army in the world right in your backyard.
Yeah, they're basically encamped, right? They're there.
Yeah, they're there. And is that the decision you make? I'm standing my ground. I mean, I am curious about stuff like that all the time.
I don't know if I would have the guts.
I don't know.
I don't know if I would. But I can tell you this, what's inspiring is when you see the people that do.
Absolutely. Well, okay, so you served a mission in Boston.
Yep, was there 2
Got
years.
to know that. That's fascinating.
Yep, and it
did
was
you
awesome.
What year was that?
I was there from 89 to 91.
Oh, okay. So did you get a chance to hit any of the Italian pastry shops?
Oh, yeah. North End, dude. Come on, man. I learned all about the North End.
I love the history is, you can't beat the history, but I enjoyed as much going to the pastry shops. In fact, that may be a reason I brought you all these pastries. You said you're not even going to eat it today, but
I'll make somebody's day with it.
Okay. All right. That sounds
good. Which helped make someone's day.
Yeah. If I can do that, if I can feel like I did that.
Here's a cool Boston story.
Great.
Real quick. Mike Smith.
Yeah.
Works for the Utah Jazz.
Yep.
Mike was drafted the day before I flew out. So I get to the airport with my group, and all of a sudden, this is back before TSA, and everybody could go to the gate. And I kind of looking down the hall, and I see this big convoy of people and a guy holding a camera, news camera, and Mike's walking down. And so Mike ends up being on our flight to Boston to go out and meet the media and everything. So I get my ticket. He gets his ticket. We end up sitting next to each other on the flight. So we chew the fat. I tell them that, I used your name a lot for dates. I would say, you guys know Mike Smith? Yeah, he's my cousin. Yeah. And girls want to go out with me, So I told him I used your name for, try to negotiate a few things.
Yeah.
And he chuckled. And so we stayed in touch. And it wasn't cell phone days, but he said, hey, you're going to be a missionary. While you're out there, look me up and I will get you into a game.
Ooh.
It's like, sweet. Okay. So this is obviously the 80s in the Celtics. Mm-hmm. And, you know what that means. It was a dynasty, his domination. Mm-hmm. It was that Lakers and
and the Celtics.
Pistons, messing around in there a little. But the craziest thing was I found him about 13 months in and made contact at a state conference or something. And we set the time. I gave him my number. And lo and behold, I get a call from the secretary of the Boston Celtics one day and leaves a message and said, hey, we got your tickets and pick them up. So we go down to the game, and when we get our tickets, there's a note on the back that says, hey, meet me around. I'll take you guys in. Meet me around the back at the causeway. So there was the old Boston Garden. There was a train station underneath it, but there was also parking and everything. And so we stood at the back, and all of a sudden, Mike rolls up in his Toyota 4Runner, and in the front seat's Joe Klein, his teammate. So we get in, we pull up and start talking. But as we pull into the park, 1, 2, 3, and I promise you can ask Mike, this happened. 3 cars pull in. There's an SUV looking like a Suburban type thing. There was a Lincoln Continental and a truck. And so I get out and I'm kind of looking around, and out of the Lincoln Continental steps out Larry Bird. Out of the truck, Kevin McHale. And out of the big SUV Suburban was the chief, Robert Parrish. And so we literally walked into the Garden through the players' entrance with the big 3. And they almost had to give me, revive me.
Did you pass out? Yeah.
Larry, so you carry around, as a missionary, you have a little rule book on you at all times in case things get weird and you got to check the rules, right? So I had my book in my pocket.
Wait,
I didn't have anything else.
What was about to get weird?
I don't know. Just if you need to seek,
you see Larry Bird, did you have some
No. I'm just telling. No, I'm just telling you what the Bible's for. The white Bible's for. But it's all I had, and I had a pen, so I opened it.
I knew this.
And I handed it to him, and he signed.
Did not.
I have a signed copy of the white Bible, the rule book, with Larry Bird's signature in the front. That's pretty cool.
You still have that?
I still have it today.
You should have brought that today. Can you send me a picture of it? We want to show people when we post this.
Absolutely.
Send me a picture of that.
It's pretty neat.
That's unbelievable. Okay, let me ask you the most important question regarding this experience. You got to watch Boston Celtics in their prime play live. You're still pretty young, though. What are you, 19?
No, I'm 54.
That explains why you finished school at 36.
See, that was really good.
It was.
Timing was good. Go ahead.
Okay, as a young man, you got to see, and so maybe you didn't watch as much with a critical eye. Maybe you did. I don't know. But you obviously are a basketball guy. Love the sport. That's the golden era. I still think of that time frame. Full disclosure, I don't watch much NBA basketball today.
You're not into it.
No, but I was into it then. And that still seems to me like the way you should play basketball.
But what you should do is listen to the pre and the post.
I always do that.
You can watch what you want.
We're going to talk about that too. I want to know. The listeners want the inside scoop because you guys all act like, there's serious stuff and you're analyzing and you're breaking down and that's all really good. But then you're kind of friendly with each other and it all seems, pretty sterile. Like everybody gets along. But I want to know if this is more like an Access Hollywood thing, like behind the scenes, are you and Alema going at it?
I cannot stand Alema Harrington.
You're not the only person.
You want to talk about an ego. No.
Fills up the
Far
room.
from that. Far from
This
that.
room and the next.
Alema's amazing. There is not a lot of drama, bro.
There's not. Do you want to make some up?
Yeah, who could get fired? No, I don't.
I know a guy.
I'm just, but that's another thing. I try to just be.
I know.
Do your job. Know your ship.
Know your ship. That's so good. I'm glad you mentioned that because we're going to head there. I want to keep talking about your life experience.
Okay.
And
so
this
we
is
got
where
to
we're
Boston.
going.
Sorry.
This is where we're going. We're going to talk about all of your life experience because it's interesting. And then I want you to tell us all the lessons. That's the know your ship. But first, you went and saw the Celtics play in their prime. Where do you put Larry Bird on the top 5 of all time list?
Oh, for me, he's up there. I mean, I think our generation, we're always going to be Jordan guys, you know?
There's no doubt.
So I'm definitely a Jordan guy at 1.
Me too.
But it's funny because then I'm starting to see the age bias. You know, my dad used to, when I was a young kid, you should
Wilt?
see Oscar Robertson
Oh,
play.
of
right?
course.
And Wilt and all that. So, but for me, just mine, he's definitely up there in the top 5. Talk about a relentless competitor. Didn't have a lot of the advantages guys did, but he was just like, if you hear about his history, he played every summer. He would show up at pickup games and cut off Levi's. You know, he would play in flip-flops or no shoes. He was just a tough dude, and that's what stood out to me when I watched him play. Was there was a lot of skill, but if you make it skill will, like his will was supreme, and that's why the Celtics were what they were. You know, I obviously all those ancillary pieces were really important, but when you look at an organization, you obviously who's leading it, and he was the leader. I thought he was leader by vocal. You know, Mike Smith talks all the time about how hard he was on guys. You know, and hold them accountable, hold them to a standard. He was sarcastic like you. Very sarcastic.
I don't know why you would say that. That's hurt. In fact, that's hurtful that you would say that.
I apologize. And I did it in the presence of the fern.
I took a chance bringing this fern out today.
It's comforted me, if nothing else. It definitely calmed my nerves. I like to see.
I'm beginning to think it was a mistake.
Is it real or fake?
You tell me.
She's fake. We're all over the place. Hopefully you can wrangle this together.
Life lessons with Tim Lacomb. This is so good. Okay. Did Larry Bird maximize his combination of skill and will? Did he maximize it?
Absolutely.
And Jordan was only better because his skill level was higher, but I think he maximized that. Like the will part was also.
Right. I mean, it's like, put it this way. We've all got bank accounts, you know. Some are bigger than others. And so money's money, but you got to make it on what you got.
So I'm asking you these questions for a reason, not just because I'm really interested in it, but you were around a lot of those guys, and I'm going to ask you about maximizing your talent because you've witnessed it. I'd be interested to find out about your own thoughts. Have you maximized your talent? Have any of us maximized our talent? Because I can look like guys like Michael Jordan. You're like, like that. Yeah, that's a perfect example. Larry Bird. That's another example of a guy from our era. Magic Johnson, maybe he's another guy that got the most out of his talent. But then there's lots of guys that you look at who you could say they still had really nice careers, really didn't maximize all that they were given. And how do you do that?
It's a great question, and I don't know that I have. I've tried. I think that we limit ourselves sometimes, though, by I think fear is a big one. You know, I've been wanting to start a podcast for a couple of years, you know, with some of the associations I have and things. I think it'd be fascinating, but it scares me to death.
What scares you?
Not so much the process.
You're the perfect guy. Like, look how comfortable you are.
No, it's not that. It's just adding one more thing to my life. You know, especially during the jazz season, and we talked about it. I do all those games, so it's 82 nights. Like, you don't realize 82 nights until you live 82 nights.
Okay, because here's what. Do you want to hear my response to that?
Yeah.
Like, you're going to try and add one more thing to your duties of broadcasting jazz basketball games. That's the worry that you have.
Well,
in
no,
your
but
life?
it's scheduled. But I got something. You know, I work a
Did you
day
like the way
job
I said
too.
that?
Yeah, Mom. You're like trying to make me feel bad for being scared.
Like all you have is the jazz stuff,
Oh,
and you can't figure out how to. You know what? It's selfish. You're just being selfish.
because the world needs more of me?
Yeah.
I highly doubt that.
Whenever I have a doubt about myself, that's what I think.
But you're being selfish.
I'm just being selfish.
Is Dolce Italian?
Yes, thank you. I've gotten so many things. When people ask me about my last name, a lot of people say French. And that is kind of, like, that seems like kind of a dig.
Okay.
Like,
well,
Dolce. Are you French? And I'm like, no.
Bro.
That's not French.
Lacomb is French.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's not a dig.
I want to ask you about that because I was almost certain that that's like a name that was Americanized. Like you made that up. Your family made that up when they came to the States to become more American.
No, we just took
Or maybe just to sound fancy,
we
like
just
your
took
last
the,
name
we
was
took
Combe.
the E off. So the French pronunciation, and it goes French Canadian. There's a lot of Lacombs in Montreal.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Are
and
they
you see hockey guys. There's hockey NHL guys with my name, but
With
they
the
have the
E
E
or-
on the end, and that's the way they Americanized the name was they capitalized the C and dropped the E.
Oh, that's how they.
So it's L-A capital C-O-M-B.
But French. Oh, like Lacombe,
Lacombe.
like the fragrance and
No,
The,
you're thinking Lancome.
oh,
I wish people call me that in the doctor's office all the time. and
Lancome?
I wish I had stand up. Yes, I would like the check.
yeah. How many people do you think say to me when I sign a receipt? or
Dolk? Is it Dolk?
No, they say, "Oh, Dolce and Gabbana."
Oh, does anybody ever called you Dolk?
No one's ever called me Dolk.
I might have to be the first.
You are the first, but that doesn't even make sense. Where do you get Dolk out of D-O-L-C-E?
Hard C.
Makes sense.
I'm hooked on phonics.
Makes sense. Hard C. Some people think that I'm Moroccan. Did you see that?
I could see Moroccan.
I can't see. Well, maybe I
Your
can.
skin tone.
What else is there besides French? Are you 100% French Canadian?
So my Lacombe side's French Canadian, and then my Sampson side, which is my middle name, is from England. Sampsons are English, Old English.
Sansum or Samson?
Sam
Because we
with a
know
P.
Sansums, no P, and Samsons, no P, and Sampsons.
That's
You're a
what we are.
Sampson.
Yeah.
You're English and French? That doesn't make sense. But you know what does make sense? Now I understand why you're fearful about taking something else on. That's the French side coming out. That's your French
and
heritage.
that goes back to the dig. So now
That's facts.
everybody in France has turned off your podcast at this point.
Do you think Macron is listening? Do you think Macron is like, I really wish I knew my shit?
If only I knew my ship. You edit
That could
this
happen.
stuff, right? Like we're not going just straight. Like there's going to be somebody making this look great.
This is going to be edited,
Okay.
but not very much because this is gold.
Are you enjoying this? Or are you okay? No, they look like they're having fun.
I think they're having Caleb for sure.
Caleb's chuckled a few times.
He has. By the way, do you know where this whole thing started? All I said was, tell me about getting your degree at 36.
Oh yeah, that's right.
How did we end up here?
Well, we went to
You went to Boston.
We went to Boston, so we probably
then you
need to
went to a
pick up
game.
from that.
Let's
and come
do that.
back. All right. So come back from Boston, and I enrolled at Utah Valley University. Mm-hmm. I went. I guess
Was it community college
It
then?
was UVSC at the time, and so I went and got all my general stuff done. You know, did the economic thing. And I think those were the years, if I'm not mistaken, that you were playing quarterback at Utah.
Was that the early 90s?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. That was like 90. I
91.
got home 91.
91,
So
92.
you were 91, 92. And I remember hearing the talk of this amazing Dolk up there taking snaps. And then I
I
realized
think he just made me Polish. That's like a Polish name.
Dolce. So, no, watched you play, and it was fun. But during that time, got my generals done and got really interested in thinking, man, I maybe want to coach. So I started doing some research and showed up one day at Jeff Judkin's office at the Huntsman Center. And I walked in. I had a buddy who was managing at the time, so he gave me a good reference. And I walked in and said, hey, I want to work for you guys. So I transferred up to the U, and I was basically Rick Majerus's consigliere for 2 years. And so I learned so much about the game of basketball, learned so much about the game of life, and I learned so much about how to treat people and how not to treat people. And I archived all that stuff. But those years were pivotal to me being able to do what I did.
Okay, so you mentioned 3 things there about all that you learned under the tutelage of Rick Majerus. By the way, speaking of the tutelage of Rick Majerus, our very own, how about that? Alex Jensen back on the hill leading the team. Are you optimistic about that?
Very. I think there's going to be more. I think we're going to see some more familiar faces.
Do you think do you think
I
that's
would
going to
imagine
happen?
that's being worked on.
Really?
Yeah, but
That would be
honestly,
unbelievable.
if you think about what they need, they just need a shot in the arm. They need guys like you, former Utes that want to just jump in and help. And if you get familiar faces in that spot and guys that have already sweat blood for the place,
Yeah.
it's easier.
Yeah. Well, Alex Jensen was great. Andre Miller, unbelievable. I used to watch Andre Miller come off the bench and think, oh no.
I got a great Andre Miller story for you.
Oh, don't forget it.
Okay, so let me tell it.
Okay.
But
wait.
not right now. But
You can tell it, but let me just remember where we are. You're in Judkin's office. Okay, you're in Judkin's office, but
no, I
then
said I would learn those things.
But then the 3 things with Coach Majerus. Okay, we're going to talk about the 3 things you learned from Coach Majerus, and then you're going to tell me your Andre Miller story.
Okay.
Okay.
Just the basketball side,
Is there, in your whole career in basketball, it's a long career, and you're still in basketball, where would you rank Coach Majerus in terms of basketball intelligence?
1.
1.
Yeah. Wow. Like he would say, it was just an amazing command of the game. But it wasn't just learn it one way and play it that way. Like he adapted over time. You know, the great story about their basketball run to the Final Four was that game against Arizona, where they really didn't have personnel to match them. But for the first time ever, he came out and did basically a triangle and 2. And it really flustered. I mean, Arizona had no idea that he would do it because he'd never played that card. And I think so over time, he just continued to get better. But the hard part was he was not great with people.
That was the other part.
And he had a great side to him. Like, my son was born and just unexpectedly got a check for $100 from Coach for something, so he was great in that respect, but he was just so single-minded on conquering the game of basketball that just didn't really allow him to have much perspective outside that.
I dealt with Coach Majerus as a student athlete, and he could not have treated me better, and he could not have been more complimentary and helpful in his way. He wasn't out of his way, but he was just solid. I could walk in there, I could walk into his office as a student athlete.
That's pretty cool.
I later worked for the athletics department, and then I had a different relationship with him. He was still
cordial.
Yes, but there was definitely a wall, and it was hard to break in.
Yeah, I really do value those years because I had one of the cooler experiences. All the time I spent with him, he just doesn't let anybody get close, you know. And he's hard because he's demanding, but you understand at the end of the day why he is. I mean, it's just the way, in my mind, you have to be. You can't really leave many stones unturned and feel like your team's going to be ready or prepared to win. So he was just so important. That was so important to him. But when I got out of coaching, which is, kind of take the next step, I decided that I didn't know that I could be that hard on guys. Honestly, that year I worked for him, I'm like, I don't know if I got this in me to coach. You know what I mean? So I started looking for other opportunities, and I took an opportunity to go start a retail business in Austin, Texas. So I actually left after 2 years at Utah with my degree, without my degree. So we'll come back. But I moved to Austin, Texas, and I started a retail business, and we bought overages from department stores and closeouts and things like that. So we were in business 2 years, had great business, but Utah came through while I was there and played Texas, in Austin. And so I reached out, again, connections and people, reached out to my buddy who I met at the store that I struck up a conversation with, happened to be the general manager of the Marriott downtown. And so when the Utes came through, Coach Majerus was put in the presidential suite, and I went to the store and bought stuff because they're going to be there 2 days. And I bought all the stuff I used to buy for him on the road, and I just filled all of his cabinets with the food he loved, and I filled the fridge with caffeine-free Diet Coke, which was his thing, which is so hard to find. But he got there that night, and he called one of, I think it was Dick Hunsaker, and he said, my room's, and they told him, hey, Tim did it. So he got my number, and he called me, and he said, hey, come over, let's go to dinner. And for the first time, it wasn't just coach, we sat for about a day and a half. I spent the time with him that I used to watch, guys on the road with random dudes would walk in, but he found comfort in that, I think. And so for like a day and a half, I just hung with him, and I learned more about him in that day and a half than I'd known in the 2 years I worked for him. But it was really good for me because I saw the tough, but I was able to kind of see the inner workings and some of the struggles, that he talked to me about, and some of the, he had confidence issues just like everybody else.
So learning that side of him, did that help you understand his style, the way that he coached, the way that he treated other people?
Yeah, it did. But again, I still think my philosophy when I got into coaching was observe everything. Randy Ray gave me a great piece of advice when I went up to Utah the second time with Ray Giacoletti. He told me my favorite guys are guys that come into a situation and you see them, but you don't hear them. A lot of people will come in and instantly start trying to tell you what's wrong with what you're doing or what your org's doing. And I think that's ego driven. And Randy's point was step back, watch everything. And that was my philosophy. And I wanted to integrate the things that worked well and jived with me. But I like treating a bus driver with disrespect, a janitor with disrespect. It's just not in my ilk, and I won't do it. Even if it's like, we got to start practice on time, I'll start practice 3 minutes late as opposed to making somebody ancillary or somebody that, they're just trying to deal with variables themselves. So, it was fascinating to see that.
Just to follow up on that point, and I know we're talking about athletics and about basketball, and maybe people who are listening are having a hard time connecting the two, but these are lessons that you apply to the corporate world as well. And so there's a few interesting things in there. One is about how you treat people and how you treat people who are considered on the bottom all the way up to the top, and treating people, building relationships. That's a thing that you do so naturally and so well. And I think you could probably say that's served you well over your career. The other thing that you mentioned is the philosophy of you're not going to walk into an organization and start blowing things up. There's great power in walking in and observing and trying to understand, and then slowly, or whatever it is, making decisions, putting people in the right position, aligning the organization based on what you've observed. Is that fair? Is that how you approach life and coaching and outside of coaching?
Well, I think I'm a benefit of the doubt guy first and foremost. And if anything, most recent, like a couple of years ago, I was asked to run a staffing agency, and that's one I look back at, and I don't know how great a job I did because I think I was always so concerned about everybody making it, and that's where I go to. I think I'm more.
And when you say everybody making it, you're saying the people that you placed in.
Well, but even the employees that worked for us, we had 40 employees, and when you're kind of in that spot, you feel the weight of everybody, being able to crack the nut and get where they need to get month to month. And that stuff wore on me, and I do think sometimes you can be too nice a guy.
Was it the concern? You're saying the concern, wanting everybody to succeed, wore on you?
Yeah, and really like getting down into the trenches with people, which is my philosophy. But sometimes tough stuff happens and you have to react. And that's just, you talk about your life and some things you do well and some things you don't. I think my personality doesn't. I was always coach's guy. I was always the player's coach kind of a guy. You know what I mean?
Yes, I know exactly what you mean. I know
and
exactly
you have to have that.
What you mean.
But it's hard to have that in I don't know.
Well, so you mentioned this just a few minutes ago. You didn't know if you could coach people hard. That was a question that you had about yourself. If you could coach people hard, that's a guy that you need.
Yeah, for sure.
And if you're the guy that's a player's coach, and that's also a guy that you need, but you don't have the ability to drive, to push people, which is not a knock on anybody. You still need that guy.
Yeah, but you've seen it.
Absolutely.
And you just use people. It's like basketball. You're never going to ask a guy that can't shoot threes to be a 3-and-D guy. Or you're going to be missing out on half of that. So anyhow, I mean, that's the other thing is I really value people that, like when Majerus was with me that night, that can talk humbly about things, and talk about, I should have treated you better and all this stuff. And at the end of the day, we are who we are, but I have made it a point in my life to not just be who I am. Like there's often people, I just get mad when this happens, or I try to fix things that are broken or fix myself in ways that can maybe help things go more smooth.
Mm-hmm. So have you graduated yet?
Yes. I'm 54. Oh, you're talking in the story. So, yeah. So
I want to stay on this. By the way, we still have the Andre Miller story.
Yeah, we do. And we haven't talked about my band. So, I mean, we got a lot of things to hit.
There's so much more.
So real quick, let me just finish the loop on the trajectory. So
let's close that loop.
So I worked for in Austin for a couple of years. When I came back, it was 2000. Year 2000. Year 2000. Do you remember that skit?
Yeah.
The year 2000, and we moved back. And about 5 months into the time I was back, I got a call from Ryan Cuff at Lone Peak High School. And I knew Ryan from growing up and playing. And Ryan asked me, "Hey, you're in the area. Would you want to coach?" So I started coaching with Ryan. It got in my blood, and I was also at the time representing my father-in-law, who's an artist, and you've seen his work all over the place. His name's Dennis Smith, and Dennis did the first job he had was the Nauvoo Women's Monument. But he has all sorts of things up in Salt Lake. He has across from the theater, the mother swinging the daughter. He's a painter as well. So while I was working as a coach in high school, my day job was I sold and represented him as his agent in the art world. So I'm a high school coach, and I'm going to Carmel, on a Sunday to a wine tasting, and then I'm flying back home to coach again. So crazy, crazy life. And
that is.
So I did all that.
We're not even halfway in.
And we closed one of the big deals I did, if you've been to Jordan Commons, which is close by to where we are right here, the big statue of the swans. And Larry Miller and I met and did that deal together and got that art. So that was really fun.
Did he commission that?
Yes.
Okay.
He commissioned it. And then he commissioned about 4 or 5 pieces at his house. So it was really neat in a little snippet of time to work with Larry and Gail on that project.
Since you're in the art world, I'm so sorry. I'm going to get you off track again.
I'm just your guest.
Have you seen the statue of Dwayne Wade?
Yes. Well, let me rephrase. I saw the statue that's supposed to be Dwayne Wade, and it's not good.
As an expert in the art world,
we have a great Utah sculptor that everybody should use for their portraits, Blair Buswell. Blair lives in Alpine, but he does stuff for the NFL Hall of Fame busts. Oh. And his stuff is, like, he did LT with the earring and the whole thing. He's really good.
That's a good one.
So Miami.
I met him once.
Call Blair. He can refix that thing.
By refixing it, do you mean...
Just start over.
Melt it.
Yeah, that would be the move, Frankie.
It's no good.
Okay, so my Andre Miller story.
It's no good. Are we on your Andre Miller story now?
So Andre Miller, really quick. Majerus one day said, "Hey, I got a couple extra tickets to the Jazz. Will you guys take Andre to the game?" I'm like, "Cool, all right." So we go to the game, take Andre. They're playing the old Sonics. Sean Kemp's in town. So they were upper bowl seats. They were just like giveaway things, And so we go, and then afterwards, he's like, take him by and get him, buy him a burger or something. So we go buy Apollo Burger, or Crown Burger, my bad. Crown Burger. Shout out Crown Burger.
Love Crown Burger.
And we stop and get a burger. And dude comes out, Nick. I don't know if you remember Nick.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Nick walks out. Again, I make friends with everybody.
I know. See, this is this is a recurring theme.
So Nick comes out. I'm sitting there with Andre, and he's like, "Man, we got broken into last night." And
Nick said this.
Yeah, he's like, they stole $20,000 out of our safe. And I'm not kidding you. Andre went like green, and he just kept mumbling, $20,000, $20,000. You know how Andre talks like an old guy? We all bust his chops about it. But he just kept repeating it. And he said, you know what I'd do with $20,000? I think he's found his 20 grand and then some.
Several times.
Which is funny. But I remember that coming out of his mouth, and he couldn't even fathom that amount.
20,000.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm fairly certain, I don't know if the statute of limitations has run, but I'm fairly certain what you did was illegal.
Yes. Well, but I don't know if it was illegal or not. Maybe it was some sort of charity thing, and I don't know. But yes, it has been a long time. If it was illegal, we didn't mean it to be. It's kind of like taking a guy to breakfast when his mom died or dad died, you know?
Yeah,
And
that's
getting
illegal.
in trouble for that.
By the way, that's illegal.
I despise the NCAA. Yeah,
Wait,
but that's a whole nother-
what redeeming quality does the NCAA have?
Well, you know, I guess kids get an opportunity at the end of the day, but man, they make it tough.
The NCAA
and it is all about them.
seems to be on the wrong side of every critical decision.
I agree.
Like on the wrong side. How can you do that? Is that by design, or is that just bad luck? Like they were like, oh man, I can't believe we ended up on the wrong side again.
Well, let me put it to you this way, and there's a reason I'm so upset about them. You know, we would go out and recruit at BYU, and I can promise you, guys were getting a scholarship. They were getting grant. You know, they were getting cost of attendance when we could give that. Mm-hmm. But they were also
This is when you're coaching at BYU. Yeah.
I mean, that's all they got. They got those two things, but then they got to sign a piece of paper saying, you know, I'm not going to do all this other stuff. So
the code.
The benefits package has changed quite a bit from the time I was there. But that's how we got guys, you know, and we got guys coming, you know, I had coaches coming in as they got there and saying, like, what are the deals? Like, who's on a deal? Like, we don't do deals here. You know what I mean? Like, everybody's here just to be here. So we did that time after time, and we all those years, like Coach Rose was so duty bound by the rules. Like, he was one of those guys, and so our meetings, we'd always talk about it. So fast forward, obviously there was kind of a crazy situation where one that we weren't even aware of or privy to, where a booster got involved with a player, and you know they lay the hammer down on Coach Rose with no infractions, no violations, all his entire time, but yet we've got for 10, 15 years we got fake courses being taught in North Carolina, and nothing happens. And at the end of the day, you can go down. I could sit here and talk to you on one side of the ledger on teams that got the book thrown at them, and the other side of the ledger, you know, where literally guys were arrested by the FBI and they still kept their job. I mean, it's or indicted or questioned by the FBI and still kept their job. So, to me, the NCAA is just it's a means to an end. You got to have some sort of organization, but I would sure like them to find a better way.
It's fraudulent.
Yeah,
like.
It's all
fraudulent
about money.
organization.
Yeah, you know, they talk about equity, but it's all about money.
It's all about money.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I guess we don't need to go into that.
Okay, but we got off on a tangent.
Once again. Okay, so have you
Graduated
yet?
So yes, I coached I coached high school for 7 years. I said I went back to high school. 3 at Lone Peak, we won a state championship. 3 at Lone Peak, 4 at American Fork.
Okay.
Okay.
Did by the way, what kind of player were you?
Average. Yeah. I was.
But you
I was the type of player.
had a love for the game.
I had a love for the game. Played in Plano, Texas, and I made the varsity team, which was cool. But I didn't play much. In fact, one game back in those days, you wore an athletic supporter under your shorts.
Yeah.
You didn't wear like they didn't have the spandex, right?
No. I'm very familiar with the athletic.
So we
supporter.
had tearaway uniforms.
Yep.
And as a money-making idea, I went to everybody in the locker room before a game. I said, I'm so sure I'm not going to play tonight. That under these ripaways, it's going to be just one layer of athletic support. There's not going to be any game shorts going on. And I said, if I could get commitment from $20 from everybody in the room, Timmy takes the bench like this. And everybody was in.
They all
had 11
all
guys on the team. I was not called into the game, and I made $220 because I was one ply shy.
I wanted the story to be like
He didn't call me in.
Hoosiers.
No, dude.
Speaking of great Gene Hackman, rest in peace.
I was
I want you, Ollie, at the end of the bench, like, Lacomb.
I was number 11. That's how, but I made the team in Dallas, and that was cool.
But
I could shoot. I was athletic. But can we get back to
let's get back to that. But you skipped this whole thing. Like, you're born Holy Cross. How did you get to Texas?
Well, I said my dad died, right?
Yeah.
So my mom remarried.
You've had experiences with 3 guys that I know about, and I know. And I want you to compare and contrast these 3 leaders and how it's affected you, but also lessons that you've learned that you've been able to bridge the gap between athletics and the stuff you do in the corporate world. Okay, so you have Rick Majerus, you have Ray Giacoletti, and you have Dave Rose. Best individual to maximize the talent available.
Man, I don't want it to sound like it's a knock on the other 2 because I think it's pretty close. But what I loved about working for Coach Rose was you had to get through a threshold of toughness with Rick to even see the floor. And there were a lot of good players that came to Utah. I think it could have worked out, but I think he had to bend a little bit. And he just was not a bender. He had a hard time touching the toes. And Ray, my experience with Ray, we went out and recruited really good players. I mean, we got Johnny Bryant here, who is now associate head coach of the Cavs and had a great career for us. But it was the young dudes we went and got. Like, Ray kind of felt like rather than go out and juke it up and get a bunch of, he was big on character. And I do think we went out and got good dudes like Sean Green, Ricky Johns, Lawrence Bora, Luke Neville. Like, we had some good dudes, but we got them young, and they were all young, and it's hard to win when you're all young.
Yeah.
I think what stands out to me, and I tell people this all the time, if Jimmer Fredette played for Rick Majerus, he would not played beyond his freshman year. He would have been similar. He was similar in style to Jordy McTavish, if you remember that name.
Of course.
Who was a big-time scorer, but he just never could get the nod from Rick. Dave, he would let guys go through things, and he also understood, like, Jimmer's not going to be the most ferocious defender, but show me who else can get us 25, every single night.
Okay, so I want to talk about the differences in those. So let's just take Jimmer Fredette, who's tremendous talent and has done unbelievably well overseas. There was this toughness factor about Rick Majerus, and I think that was a manifestation of he didn't always have the most talented guys, but they could be the toughest guys.
That's right.
And they could be willing defenders. And if you weren't a willing defender and a hard guy on the court, then you just weren't going to play. Could Coach Majerus have molded that into Jimmer Fredette? Could he have maximized Fredette's ability? Because I think that was a knock on him. He could score from anywhere on the court, but maybe wasn't a willing defender.
Yeah, but I also believe that I think it's a fine line because I don't know if he even gets a chance to show that he can make a shot. Like, you think about the dudes that came to Utah, and we heard all these awesome things,
all of the great
right?
things, yes.
But they had to get through the checkpoint. And sometimes, and there wasn't like Donnie or Judd or Tommy, like, coaxing Coach through that checkpoint. Like, Coach was the ultimate, like, and that's in leading contrast in style. I think Majerus was definitely more hammer guy. I think Dave was a guy who was more, he was definitely strong-minded and had, we were going to do things that he wanted to do, but he was more consultative with the assistants, and we'd talk through things. And even if we knew it was going to go the way he went, it was refreshing at times to be hurt, and there were games we won because we did some things that he kind of acquiesced to. So it was fun. All 3 of those guys are so vastly different, but I think you could say the same if you just drove up and down this
Sure.
row of complexes and went in and talked to each and every leadership group.
Absolutely. Okay, so that's the next question. This fern is...
It's nice, but it can be intrusive. I found myself petting it a bit ago.
you like, I hold this pen because I like to have something in my hand, and I just saw you were like,
Yeah,
you just
grab
need
the
to-
fern.
You just need a little
Power of the fern.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to have to use this
If you ever
more
have me back,
regularly.
then we just need to add one fern each time.
pretty soon. No one
Imagine
will
like
see
a
us.
big table.
And that may be the best podcast.
Yes.
When we're not
Behind all ferns.
behind all the ferns. Okay, with those three guys, and I love this conversation because we can go back and forth between all the invaluable lessons you learn in athletics and how you can transfer that over to your business life, which you've done in many ways. What are the leadership principles? As you were just talking about leadership, what are the leadership styles that you learned from each of those guys? Or what are some of the things you learned from each of those guys that you can use off the court?
I would say Rick's very simple. Detail. Detail is so important. And, I think the way the world moves now, everything's so fast. And think about driving, trying to respond to a text, a phone call comes in, an email pops up. I mean, life is crazy fast. So it's even more important to live in the details. And I found that in I left coaching, I went into the corporate world. It was similar to like Shawshank Redemption, when the old feller gets out of jail and everything's moving so fast and you're just trying to figure it out. But detail, if you can stay detailed, when I went into that corporate job, the CRM, I'd never used a CRM. And, the importance of the stuff you put in a CRM, because if you skip, stuff there, the deal's going to be affected. So, just learning to be like Majerus, learning to make sure that there's detail and to make sure that the basics are always, top of mind. Mm-hmm. I would say Ray's. I think Ray's was his ability to have guys kind of believe. I think that group that he came in with, they were all coached by Rick all those years, but I think there were a bunch of guys that were beaten down. Self-admitted beaten down is kind of what, and he was hard to play for because it was every day. It would be like trying to work for you.
It's very difficult.
Very difficult. So
Crack the whip.
So I think when Ray came in, I think his style was refreshing, and it was one of more, I'm not going to get into insults or drama or any of that. We're just going to play ball. And so I think his ability to lead, but lead with his guys in mind, I think would stand out. And then with Dave's, I think it was his fight. When you talk about teams that were undermatched, we went in time after time and played teams that had NBA guys, and we never really were an NBA factory down there. And it's awesome right now what Kevin's doing because he brings NBA experience, but now they've also got some money. And
money.
They go out and sign the number one dude
That
in the
payroll
country.
would rival some NBA teams.
Right. But I don't begrudge it because I lived there all that time, particularly when Utah got into the Pac-12 and we're literally taking calls like, hey, sorry, I don't want to play in high school gyms. That was the determining factor on a few guys. So we took, at BYU when I was there, we took the back seat and Utah kind of had all the power. I think the scales shifted quite a bit. And with NIL, now everything's above board, and BYU's got resources and fan base that's just amazing.
Yeah, that is unbelievable. In fact, I don't know. I still worry about where NIL and collegiate athletics is.
Yeah, I do too.
I think it's nuts.
I think Dave's was what he's shown in his life too. I mean, I remember sitting on the floor. I lost my first bet to my brother-in-law, $1, the NC State Houston game. And I remember Dave Rose flying around out there playing with that team. But that's that type of competitor that he was as a player. He had that edge to him. But when I went back and I said earlier, so respectful to janitors, so kind to wait staff, so nice to bus drivers, had everything in perspective. So wanted to win the worst way, pushed as hard as possible, but might have had the best coaching perspective of anybody.
But lifted everybody else up around him. And you mentioned that he was a great developer of men.
Yes. Yeah. And we went through a really crazy thing with Brandon Davies down there, you know.
Yeah, no kidding.
And it makes me smile every time I see a picture of he and his family. You know, he's killed it over there in Europe. But the story there is you don't have to be defined by one bad thing. You know, there's plenty of opportunity to go out and change the narrative.
Yeah. So now you're legit. Like, you have your degree, you've coached at Utah, you've coached in high school, you've coached at Utah, you've coached at BYU. And what happens next? Life takes a little turn.
Yeah, so all during that time, loved coaching, but little by little, I think some of the transactional parts of the business got to me. I am not in any way transactional. What you see is what you get, pretty authentic. So that started to eat at me. You know, people, crazy when you get out of coaching, how many people stop calling you that used to call you all the time, and you realize what they were after. But coached for 12 years, but I felt it inside. I just didn't have what it took anymore. I went to coach in February, the year he decided to shut it down, and told him I was going to finish that year. And a couple weeks later, you know, he made the decision too. So left, and I went to work. Went out in the corporate world. I got a sales job with a logistics company. So I can speak DIMS and measurements and weights
now.
And deadhead. And
How was it?
the very first day I
How was
wanted
it
to cry. Oh man, I wanted to cry. I was in a cubicle, and I was, I had my own office. I was the associate head coach at BYU. I had this amazing office, view of the mountains, and I'm in a cubicle, literally just staring, and everybody next to me is speaking a language, logistic language I don't understand. But again, I kind of dug into what Coach Majerus would do. Every single day I showed up. Every single day I pushed and drove, and I kept really great records. And as fate would normally have it, the biggest deal that I did there wasn't one that I went and found. It was it was my up on the phone. And so I got him that way. But I learned how hard it is to close a deal, how much competition you have in anything. Which makes, again, all the things we talked about, knowing your ship, being approachable, making people feel good, being knowledgeable about your product, and then obviously follow through galore, right? And so I went from sitting in that desk to getting put into another desk, and I got a better view as I went, and we closed a couple of deals, and then that business got sold.
Yeah.
Then I went and did the staffing, which I talked about, for a couple of years. And now I'm just doing some consulting with a car company, Next Gen Motors, down in Orem, Utah. We specialize in branded title, which is pretty cool. Cars that have been wrecked, low miles, but just more cosmetic damage, and we kind of fix them up and get them back on the road.
Gotcha.
At a good cost. So now I'm doing that. So it's just crazy. To me, I think the bottom line is the skill set along the way has been refined. The tool belt's been added to, vocabulary, like in anything, coaching, playing, you got to understand what's going on. So it's been one thing like that after the other. And here we sit.
I didn't even have to ask you the questions. You already answered all the questions about that. I wanted to know about the transition from athletics into the corporate world. And you talked about that. I think one of the things that you said is showing up every day.
Oh man, big, right? I went to a fundraiser in Beverly Hills a couple of years ago, and it's an amazing event. These two brothers put on, and you grew up watching play is there. I mean, it's football, basketball, hockey, talking Gretzky, Shaq, everybody's there. And this year they honored Reggie Jackson, one of the recipients. And when he got up there, and I taped it, I actually have it on my phone, but Reggie got up there, and he was taking questions, and somebody said, "How were you able to, raise your level every year in October? It's known as Mr. October. How were you able to raise your level every single year?" And he said, "Well, it started spring training. I showed up every single day, and I took my cuts, and I was on time, and I was prepared, and I was mentally ready, and my uniform looked good." And I stepped into the box, and if I took 10 my swings, I hit 10. And if I was supposed to bunt twice, I bunted twice. And, when I ran the bases, I ran as hard as I could run. And I went in the locker room, waited for the game. And, days in March stacked to days in April, and you're seeing the pitches better. But you got to live it. It can't be something that you just peekaboo, show up on a Monday, let things go Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or Wednesday, Thursday, and try to pick up the pieces on Friday. And so it's little things like that you learn along the way too from greats that say, hey, it's not that I was that much better than everybody. Sure, I was great, but the reason I got really good is because I worked at it.
That goes back to the details that you're talking about and making sure that every day you're managing the details. And as soon as those get lost, then you get lost. And Reggie Jackson showing up every day is just managing all of the details. Sometimes that can be mundane, but it's critical.
Do you feel like, and I'll ask you this, do you feel like there's the mundane's the word or comfort? You know what I mean? Because there's a fine line.
It's a really good question. It's a really good question.
We all seek comfort, but we think that comfort is doing everything that we want to do. Mm-hmm. And comfort sometimes is getting in a routine that works and following that routine.
Do you ever feel better when you are out of your routine, or do you feel better when you're in your routine? I mean, it's there's no question. But we fight. Why do we fight against the routine?
And I would imagine all of us do, but
I do all the time.
Yep.
I don't know what we just figured out there, but it sounded pretty good. I mean, I think that sounded reasonable advice.
I think it did too, from two
guys with a fern in between.
In between, and good intentions.
Okay, I'm going to talk about your band now.
Okay.
The Party Hounds.
We just verbally agreed today to play an event for a local company here, so I'm excited about that.
Did you decide to do the 2 Z's at the end of Hounds because of the Utah relation?
It's like not 2 Z's. I told you that.
You said Party Hounds.
Yeah, but I was saying it like I didn't want people think I said Party House, which I think would be a cool name too. But it's the Party Hounds.
See, you did it again.
I got to put the D in there. Party Hounds.
I think it's more of a Party Hounds.
Yeah. But yeah, we are 40 years long. We
started in high school.
Stayed together today. We have a tycoon as our drummer, guy that's done really well. He's done really well in life. He's done great in life. And then we have our bass player owns an engineering company. Our rhythm guitar player is a salesman for environmental products. Our other guitar player is a professional guitar, he's a rock and roll guy.
Oh, I was going to ask you, is there anyone in the band who's an actual musician?
Yeah, he is. And then you've heard my story, and I'm the front man.
Are you the front man because you are the most talented?
No.
Is it because you relate?
I didn't play an instrument
to the crowd
at the time.
You didn't?
I met him in James, the drummer, and I were baggers at Tom Thumb Grocery. Mm. And one day we were out in the parking lot, and he came up to me. He's like, "Bro, can you sing?" And I said, "Can I sing? I'm in the choir."
Oh.
And so he said, "What are you doing after work? Can you come audition?" So I went out to his place. It's Plano, Texas. I mean, I just moved out there a couple of years before trying to find my identity there because I had grown up here. And instantly there was karma, there was connection. And we made great music together. We go in and play for 2 hours and there wouldn't be a song you hadn't heard before. That's what's fun is you can sing along. We play all the covers,
all the stuff.
From 70s to now. We even covered Posty Malone last time.
Is that right?
You need to get him on your show.
He'd
be fascinating.
Do you know him?
I'd like to know him. I will get to know him somehow. He seems like a cool cat.
I don't know him. How am I supposed to get him on the show? Call him
tag
up
him
and say, hey.
Tag him on this and say, hey, there's been a recommendation.
Does that work?
I don't know. Maybe you'd do it.
I mean, he
if
does.
You pay me as much, if you pay him as much as you paid me, yes, he'll do it.
You mean a box of pastry?
Yeah, pastry and
He looks like a guy who would enjoy a pastry. You don't. You're not, but he might. Okay, so I'm gonna work on getting Post Malone here. Okay, why are you in a band?
Well, we did it for fun. We actually did it back then to make money. We were charging all sorts of different orgs and schools and stuff, and we made T-shirts and sold merch and stickers on the back of cars. So we did it as it was a fun thing to do. We loved to rock. All of us are passionate about music. Mm-hmm. Do you know the lead guitar player for Aerosmith by chance? His name?
I don't.
Joe Perry. You could ask me a band, and I can pretty much rock you through it. Journey is Neil Sean plays the guitar for Journey. obviously Steve Perry was the lead singer, but the lights went down in the city, unfortunately.
I'm going to stump you on this one.
Okay.
Van Halen. Go.
Well, it's a tandem. I mean, it depends on the era. We got Roth and we got Hagar. That's one of my favorite bands.
Who was the lead guitarist?
EVH. His brother Al on the drums and Michael Anthony on the bass.
Who was the guy? Now I want to ask you a bunch of music trivia that I don't know. Who was the guy who was the drummer who got into the accident and then he drummed with one arm?
Oh, that's for Def Leppard. Mm-hmm. And I can't remember his name.
But that's a real thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He plays with one arm and he's incorporated his legs into it too.
So is it just for enjoyment?
Now, yes. Now it's fun. We actually have a way we can, from time to time, get online and play. Like we stream from wherever we are.
Oh.
And latency
Fancy.
can be an issue at times. But for us, if we can have 2 shows on the calendar every year, that's we don't need to go out and, but it just gives us something to look forward to and we really enjoy it. We played most recently a football game at McNeese State down in Louisiana.
Really?
Yeah. And got talks this year. Hopefully we'll be playing a game at BYU as well. They're going to hire the Hounds.
Okay. Can you use any of the stuff that all of your life lessons, is that applicable to being in a band?
No, I just think it's, I think I could write some good songs if I ever got the time. I think I could write just from some of the things I've gone through.
That's, again, selfish. Like, you could write some good songs.
Yeah.
Why don't you write some good songs?
Yeah. I just need to dig in. You're coaching me right now. You're actually being one of those guys. It's hard on guys, and I get it.
But
I think I need. I do think I need.
But I love you.
Yeah,
But you should write some.
a little bit.
You should write some music. Do people think of, like, when I look at you, I just don't think there's anything you can't do. I mean, that's the vibe you give off.
I would,
That's why I said Tim Lacomb, the Renaissance man, Life and Times of Tim Lacomb with a capital C. Like, there's nothing that you can't do. That's your persona.
There's plenty I can't do, but I'm going to tell you what my favorite thing about being
Maybe
me
you
is
just
now.
make it look easy. Like you go from thing to thing, and it's easy. You're a coach. You're in the corporate world. You're selling. You're in a band. You're on the radio. You're on TV. Like, you just make all of that look. There's not a lot of people that can do that. You can go from all of these or cross all of these different disciplines.
Yeah, and I do think part of it is, my philosophy is what's next. It's I often say, and I look back, and you've probably done this too, where you look back on your life and say, why did I do that, or why did that happen? And then, maybe 6 months down the road, something approaches you, and because of your experience, you can take that step. I've always just led with people, and again, I think. I used to tell people this in the office all the time. You're not closing a deal with an organization. You got to figure out who's hitting, and you got to go and sell that person, because at the end of the day, if you're selling, hey, we've got this and that as companies, I want to hear who you're working with. Because to me, that at the end of the day, like the big deals I got when I was doing logistics, it came down to understand, the guy I was working with and what was important to him, and constantly selling that, reinforcing it, and following up. I hit the fern.
You take it easy on the fern. You get so excited.
I do. But that is the essence of it. And I do think there's part of it. You just have to step up and do some things. I talked about fear earlier, but I wish you could see me some nights though when I'm, it's not like everything's perfect, and it's not like I approach everything with confidence. I was a bucket of nerves coming up here today. I really was. As well as I know you and everything, I just wasn't sure, so.
That's part of the thing.
It's part of it.
It's part of your thing, is that you take things
serious.
It's serious.
I'm pretty into, my wife would tell you I'm way too, like, she gets frustrated that I've talked to a lot of people often. I get coaches that still call me today. And, I've got friends I've made like you and Alema and Dave Fox and guys that I've worked with. David James, one of my favorite dudes I've met, in this thing. So it's interesting, but in order to have relationships, you have to devote time to it. And sometimes that's a trick too.
You talk about relationships so easily, like that's just something that's a part of you. It is building the relationships. And I can see in my role and in the way that I work, how important and how critical relationships are. And especially for guys that, where it's not just natural, but it's meaningful. It's not transactional, as you said. Relationships are meaningful. You know everybody, and everybody you know likes you. And as I've heard your story now that I really appreciate, it seems like there's a very clear connection between what happened to you when you were really young and the angels that you talk about in your life and how meaningful that was for you, and now you're just paying it back. Like this is something that has developed in you because of your life experiences, and it served you. Like, not everybody can manage relationships, and the people who can, it's a real talent.
Well, I appreciate it. To me, it's just kind of been what my life's been.
Yeah.
To bring it full circle, but have you ever talked to a medium? Have you ever spent time or talked to a medium? Do you know what a medium is?
A guy about your size?
That sweater was a medium. No, in all honesty, do you know? Do you honestly know what?
You set me up. You set me up for that. You set me up. I immediately thought a guy about your size, but then I started laughing.
I got you. Okay. So anyway, here we go.
I couldn't say it, but no. Is this what you're talking about?
Right, like there's a TV show called
California. Don't they do that in California?
Long Island Medium or whatever. Anyhow, I'm seriously searching, and I always have searched for a connection with my dad. And, I've gone through the traditional things and, certainly been observant, but never really felt to have, But then when I started looking deeper at it, seriously, it's like I do believe sometimes they're able to intervene, and they are able to help sometimes with a thought or opening a door, for you. But this kind of made the hair stand up on the back of my neck. One of the things I do every single night before I go to bed, I'm still a kid at heart, is I eat kids' cereal. So my wife gets Trix, Lucky Charms.
What?
Yeah, and I just go down and have a little bowl of cereal before I go to bed. And so I'm talking to this medium. I'd never met him. It was over the phone. Mm-hmm. My cousin, whose father and mother passed in the plane crash, actually had a session with him and was amazed at the detail that he could give and the connection that he made. So I went on reference and did this. So we're on the phone. We're just about ready to hang up. And he said, all right, Tim, our time's up. He said, oh, wait a second. Hold on. Your dad's laughing. Because he had introduced my dad to me early in the call without even me asking. Like, he's like, I didn't have to tell him my dad, died. Mm-hmm. He's like, hey, Tim, how you doing? Looks like you lost your dad. He's here. And basically, we get to the end of the conversation, and he said, hold on, your dad's chuckling. And I said, what's he laughing about? And he said, he thinks it's funny you still eat kids' cereal every night. And all that stuff that I thought, where is he? And is he in the details of my life? And it was just a reassurance that absolutely. And so when I talk about angels, I talk about the people that stick their neck out for you, that go to bat for you, that are in your corner when things get hard. But I talk about literal angels too. Mm-hmm. And, I used to fear the idea of not being here, but there is an excitement to understand how might I get to intervene for my kids or my grandson, that's what I live for now. I have a 4-year-old grandson that's my pride and joy.
Well, I think there's connection that we don't know about,
or totally
we're
agree.
not willing to look into. And mostly for me, it's like, I don't want to talk about it or say it because I don't want other people to think I'm crazy. Like,
well,
hey,
most people know I am, so I went ahead and hucked it out there.
It's fine because people know that but like I'm an upstanding member of society. People have high expectations of me. I realize this. And so I don't want them to think I'm crazy. If I say, I had this feeling, I know it was my grandfather speaking to me. But I'm also, confession, certain that occurs.
No, I totally agree. I think it's more, and it's more in the everyday natural things that we look for big things always. And it's little reassurances or little passing thoughts. Or here's one. A couple of years ago at church, my wife leaned over to me. She said, do you realize that every single time we're in little babies, like babies sitting in front of us, that they engage with you and smile and laugh. And it hit me that, that was maybe a way again that I'm here and I care about you and I'm sorry I can't be there.
Yeah. I thought you were going to tell me the time when she leaned over and said, "Do you realize you're wearing 2 different socks again?"
Why are you wearing your flippers to church? People are gonna think you're crazy.
No, you can't wear those furry slippers.
Just Christmas. On Christmas you can.
What if we paid more attention to those details? I don't think we pay attention to those details.
Well, I honestly, dude, we did not rehearse this, and I was so excited to talk to you because I see you as you're an intelligent guy, but you're a guy like me, I think, that thinks things through. And so I was looking to where this would come to a point, and I think the point is detail. I think in our daily lives, it's probably, and use the word mundane, it probably becomes mundane, and we seek something new, something dopamine that we haven't felt before. But there is beauty in the details of our lives, and I think that's something over the last few years anyway that I've tried to hone in on.
I think you brought that together so nicely, and I just reflected back on Reggie Jackson starting in the spring.
Yeah.
And taking his cuts. And what if we just did that every day? What if we just showed up, paid attention to the details, and took our cuts? Because October's coming.
It is. It's always around the corner.
It's always around the corner. Oh, I love that. Man, I didn't realize that you had this depth of character. And I don't mean that I hope that doesn't come across the wrong way.
Boy, I sure took you for a dud.
I really thought we were going to be in here for 15 minutes, and I was like...
Well, that was what was funny to me is the thing you sent me. It's like, I don't know if he's expecting much from this, but we'll give her a shot. So, but more than anything, I'm honored that you would have me come, and I really don't consider myself anything more than just a dude out there on the street. I'm serious.
That's the greatness of Tim Lacomb.
My best friends at the Jazz are the ushers. Like to me, it's about every person you interact. And I think if you go out there every day and say, I can make somebody's day better by just being a good person, man, it's a good way to go to bed at night.
Isn't it so true? I was just talking to a guy today here at work about examples people give, and those are the most valuable lessons, good and bad, like positive and negative examples. Those are learning experiences for all of us. When I was growing up, we grew up in a nice area, and we also had good friends who lived in areas that were kind of rough, like right around LA, and my dad was the chauffeur, like he was the team chauffeur. So kids, we would get done with practice. They would jump in my dad's truck, and this is when we would jump in the truck bed because was
old
fun
school,
to ride in the truck bed. And then he would deliver everybody. And who knows? I don't even know how long it took, but it took some time. It was out of our way, whatever. And that was the thing that he did. We didn't have a lot of money. He didn't give money or financial support necessarily, but he did give time.
Well, he's an angel of those kids, that maybe wouldn't been able to get to practice.
And when we reminisce with those guys about my dad, who is still with us, those are the things that they remember. It's like when you finish playing a sport. So I finished playing football, you finished playing basketball, whatever. Your career is over. And to a person, there's a few maybe, when you ask about what are you going to miss the most, everybody says the camaraderie, being with each other, the locker room, all of the really meaningful stuff. And I think that you bring that out in everybody, this immediate camaraderie. That's a great lesson. It's a great lesson to learn. And so if you ever have a chance to be around this man right here, you'll notice that. I want to end this on a high note.
Okay.
Who's a better person, Dave Fox or Alema Harrington?
Well, this one's, some of the things you asked me were splitting hairs, but fortunately this one is not close. And the guy who's got I don't want to be too direct, but the guy who's got the last name that is an animal, I would say, is far less the human being. And with that, I would like to dedicate. I'd like to set that right there on your knee.
Thank you. I think I might just put that in front of my face. Tim, this has been amazing.
Thanks, man. No, in all honesty, we joked a bunch, but I do.
I know, but that's
I think the world of you, brother.
That's the beauty. I know you do. Like, you don't even have to tell me that. And I already know. If I could do that for other people, I think that would be a win. If I could have people understand how I feel about them, like that emotion, just by the way that I treat them, I know that that's how you feel about me. That's why at any moment I can text you or I can call you or I can do whatever, and I know you're going to pick up. And then if I don't pick up your call, then you leave me a blistering voicemail.
But we'll get into that part of my temperament in part 2.
This has been a lot of fun.
Thanks, buddy.
As you look back on your life, before I let you go, what are the things that you think you do really well? What are the things that you think you can work on? And what are the things you're striving to do every day?
I think I make friends. I think it's the best thing I do. It's not, to me, that's where everything starts. Mm-hmm. Where I could be better, where we're talking right now. You let details slip in your life sometimes, and it's not always work related or, it's all facets. So just being present into the details of things, I can certainly be better at that. Well, I'm sorry, I can't remember. The third one is to remember what was asked of me, and I typically can't do that either.
Third one is to pay attention to the guy who's asking.
I love my kids. I feel like I didn't have a great chance of being. You can't be a great dad when you're coaching Division I basketball. You're gone so much and you miss so many things. So part of me getting out is being with my kids. I've got 3 awesome kids and incredible son-in-law and grandson, and we are. That's where my mojo all goes pretty much now.
Awesome. Well, I hope you come back and visit us sometime.
Anytime you want.
Yeah, and I have lots of great ideas of things that we should be doing together. So whenever you're ready.
I'll break down some walls. You have to be the smart guy that has the idea. I'll go get us in where you need to go.
I mean, that sounds like the perfect team.
Yep.
I also just will mention my lifelong dream is to be Dean Martin or Frank Sinatra. So if you guys...
Fly me to the moon. I want to.
You got it. There he is.
All right.
Tim Lacomb, Know Your Ship. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, man.
Thank you for listening to the Know Your Ship podcast presented by eHub. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review.